Chapel's quite full. Below on each side of the altar, a grenadier is on duty with grounded musket. The nave is filled by the people who have reached it by the low gallery at the garden side. The emperor, in fact, would never allow tickets of admission to be given for his chapel. The places were for the first comers. Everything connected with public worship ought to be free for the people, said he. The obligation of paying at the door or of paying for chairs is a revolting thing. The poor ought not to be deprived of that which consoles them in their poverty, because they are poor. The imperial tribune fills up all the end of the building opposite the altar. On the left are the tribunes reserved for the ladies of the palace and for the ladies who have been presented at court. On the right are the large open windows of the hall of the Council of State, to which hurry all those who will presently take part in the grand audience, and who possess the right of entree to the palace, all in the uniform of their rank or in the costume of their office. And it is under these circumstances, with the end of the chapel all glittering with gold and silver, and this side adorned with fresh toilettes, the other less gaudy, but where the vibrating tones of military uniforms sound their trumpet notes over the less asserting assemblage of civil costumes interspersed with light silks, with the floor on which anyone finds a place who, as the order runs, presents a decent exterior. That attention is given to the musicians of the Imperial Chapel, arranged in an amphitheater in a circular niche opposite to the Emperor, behind columns which adorn the other end of the room above the altar. Napoleon calls to mind the request addressed to him when he was first consul by Sheridan, at the time he was about to reestablish the Catholic religion. "You will be obliged to go to Mass," said Sheridan. "That may be. But you will also compel the public functionaries to go too? How absurd!" "No, citizen consul, that will be the case, because it will seem to you necessary, and what I ask you even now is to attach excellent musicians to your chapel, because good music is the remedy against tediousness, and the Mass, which we are no longer used to hearing, might seem very tedious to us." No chapel in the world was comparable to that of the Emperor. The director, actor, Paisiello was Lister, the composer of Labard. Lister prescribed ruin, reduced to despair by the faction of the Conservatoire, whom the first consul received, gave him bread, an asylum, a theater, and the means of gaining glory. 2 chefs d'orchestre, Persuis and Rochefort, 2 first men singers, Lais and Mertin, 4 first ladies, Mesdames Branchou, Armand, Duray, Albert, and in addition 3 first travels, 3 second travels, males, and the same numbers of women. A first tenor, 5 tenors, 5 baritones, 2 contraltos, 6 singing basses. In the instrumental department, in the first places, the first violin of the Emperor, Kreutzer, in addition to 8 first violins, 9 second violins, 4 violas, 8 violoncellos, 4 contrabassi, 2 pianos, a harpist, 2 flutes, 3 hautbois, 4 clarinets, 1 solo horn, 3 horns, and 4 bassoons, and they were the first artists of Paris, whom the Emperor made Lister pick up one by one at the very moment when it seemed as though nothing was left for him but to leave the country or to die, as Gervini and the Conservatoire shut every door against him. Among them, all they divided was 153,800 francs, but what was even more valuable, they had the imperial patronage, and beyond their salaries in the imperial theaters, they found pupils out of whom they made a good living. The drum had scarcely announced the arrival of the Emperor than the master of ceremonies of the church appeared, and the officiating priest, surrounded by his assistants, came out of the vestry. After having bowed to the altar, he turns towards their majesties, bows, and at once begins the Mass. It is not long, lasting about 20 minutes, and throughout the music continues. This music is excellent and uncommon, for Lister composed the greater part of his masses for the Emperor's chapel. The Empress Josephine, kneeling on a prie-dieu covered with crimson velvet with gold fringe, remains in an attitude of the deepest attention. She is habited in a robe with a train in the Greek style, the waist and sleeves short, her head dressed in the Greek styles, ornamented with a diadem. By her side, just a little behind, The emperor stands in the military attitude at mass, that is to say, standing up, the arms crossed, and his looks wandering here and there. Sometimes he leans over to Josephine, who only listens to his conversation for the time strictly necessary, and as soon as possible resumes her air of piety and attention, except at these moments, without pretending to any devoutness or without falling on his knees. He's grave, serious, and impassive. It is to this mass that artists must repair if they are desirous of drawing here from nature. There is no lack of them, and we possess as evidence of drawing a crude dag in 1811, two drawings of sheer dag in 1812, and many more, no doubt, which are not known of, and sleep in the portfolios of amateurs. This seriousness in the presence of a religious ceremony makes a contrast in the memory of people of the old court with the recollection of Louis XVI, whose behavior scandalized the English travelers, for, except at the adoration of the host, he was during the mass engaged in the gayest possible conversation with the evil Count d'Artois. It was only after December 9th, 1806, that Mass was celebrated in the chapel constructed by Percy and Fontaine. Up to that time, the Sunday worship had been somewhat irregular and had not been surrounded with suitable pomp. By a letter of Germinac 30th, year 10th, First Consul charged Duroc to have constructed in his work cabinet at the place where his bath was all that was necessary to form a little chapel, by putting a painting or a piece of tapestry over the glass, and by having a sort of screen put up to match the staircase, which would make it possible to communicate directly between the said little chapel and his bedroom. That lasted a very short time, and it is even doubtful whether this oratory was ever used. Subsequently, Mass was celebrated every Sunday in the hall where the Council of State held its sittings. The altar shut up during the week in a closet appeared on Sunday. The desks of the emperor and of the grand dignitaries were removed. They arrived as well as they could. The tables of the councilors of state, the masters of requests, and the auditors, and matters went on in this way. 2 alterations had to be ordered in the palace in 1805 before a corner was given for the worship of God between the hall of theatrical performances and the hall of the council of state. After the post-communion, the Domini Salvum executed by all the musicians and the prayer chanted by the celebrant. The latter bows to the emperor from the altar, and the procession reforms to return to state apartments. Then the crowd gathers round. There are civil functionaries down too, and including sous-prefets, military officers to the rank of chief of battalion, and civil functionaries and officers of inferior rank, invalided or discharged, who had received authorization of the chamberlain of the day. The authorization is the last order to be given, never to refuse the entree. There is no admission, however, except in uniform or in full dress, no private dress. Men who have been presented, who come to pay their court, are in costume à la Française with a sword.